Folks, it looks like the narrative that plant-based diets are the best for human flourishing, for your health, is finally falling apart. That a plant-based diet is ancestrally appropriate for human beings. It looks like that's collapsing, and it's finally collapsing. In the same way that the narrative that veganism or any plant-based diet is the most ethical diet for human beings due to a number of animal lives lost should be collapsing if more people in our space would actually hit on the fact that trillions upon trillions of animal and insect lives are destroyed to produce the amount of plants needed to sustain human beings at this time. And that's not really a problem with animal-based diets. Food for thought. The fact is, though, for us to eat, something has to die. Something has to give up its life. That's an inescapable fact. That is just a part of the nature of being alive and the sort of how the ecosystem works. You eat something that was alive before. When we accept that as human beings, I think we'll be much happier. The modern problem now is that our diets cause us to die prematurely. That doesn't actually have to happen, folks, but a plant-based diet is not going to help people achieve better health outcomes. We know this now with some new studies that have come out because these aren't the first ones that you may have heard some people talk about already. We've been covering this as a general community for months now, that there are peer-reviewed studies coming out saying that plant-based diets are not the best for human flourishing. So our first example of this comes from a study published in, well, I'm looking at the PubMed posting for this on the National Library of Medicine's website, and its headline is Debunking the Vegan Myth, the case for a plant-based forward omnivorous whole foods diet. And it basically links a lot of problems, including depression, to plant-based diets. Your diet should not be causing you problems like that. It should not be causing you problems that can literally be existential problems for you, that can threaten your very existence. Here's the abstract. Vegan diets are widely promoted as protective against cardiovascular disease. However, removing all animal foods from a human's diet usually causes unfavorable health consequences. Our hominin ancestors began consuming meat, fish, seafood, and eggs 2 million years ago. Consequently, humans are genetically adapted to procure nutrients from both plant and animal sources. In contrast, veganism is without evolutionary precedent in Homo sapiens species. Strict adherence to a vegan diet causes predictable deficiencies in nutrition, including vitamins B12, B2, D, niacin, iron, iodine, zinc, high-quality proteins, omega-3, and calcium. Prolonged strict veganism increases risk for bone fractures, sarcopenia, anemia, and depression. A more logical diet is a plant-forward omnivorous eating pattern that emphasizes generous consumption of natural unprocessed foods, predominantly from plants. To balance this diet, modest amounts of wholesome animal foods such as wild-caught fish, seafood, pasture-raised meat and eggs, and fermented unsweetened dairy should be consumed regularly. Now, what other people are reporting about this is that this is, a victory for carnivores, and it is in that way that they're including pasture-raised meats and, animals in general. What I just read to you sounds an awful lot like the clean, ideal version of the standard Occidental or standard American diet. This is what we are told by the powers that be we should eat in the Western world. Our glorious leaders never tell us to go eat fast food all the time. They're not that dumb. That's just, as a people, our mistake that we make. But what they are emphasizing here is that the standard American diet is essentially the one you should do. The one that if you follow a clean version of it, plant forward, as they say. And they don't really say what that actually means. But this is an interesting study nonetheless, because there is a push by the powers that be to get people to adopt a plant-based diet. Not plant forward, a plant-based diet. That is at this point undeniable. Now, I don't have to tell you that, of course, that would have catastrophic consequences for human flourishing. I mean, as this study suggests and as others have suggested, although not everybody's accepting that. But here, let me give you the last of some of the highlights here from the study. Vegetarianism appears to be associated with a high prevalence of depressive episodes. In this study, participants who excluded meat from their diet were found to have a higher prevalence of depressive episodes as compared to participants who consumed meat. And this association is independent of socioeconomic, lifestyle factors, and nutrient deficiencies. This would include anything that we are aware of right now that causes depression and these kind of anxiety disorders. So again, it's at least refreshing that we're getting a nutrition-based approach to the human health question. And that's not something we see a lot of. Frankly, we don't see a lot of that at all. Now, of course, though, the media is reporting on this, and they can't let the alleged health benefits of a plant-based diet go. The New York Post reported on this research with this headline: "Vegans and vegetarians depressed twice as often as meat eaters, new study." They had to remind us that the research consistently shows apparently that heart disease goes down when living a plant-based Mediterranean diet. That high consumption of animal fats can lead to heart disease, even though there are no long-term studies on people living a carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet because of the ethics of issues. I mean, it's very hard to do controlled long-term studies on human nutrition. So you generally have to keep people under observation. Having done, peer-reviewed research in the past when I was in graduate school, the human subjects research standards for any university are very hard to navigate, and you would never get a long-term nutrition study greenlit, one where you controlled what people ate. You have to keep them in a cell, basically, to keep them from cheating. So there was one apparently that followed carnivores recently that some, like Dr. Sean Baker and others, reported on several months ago. But beyond that, this is a new area of research. So we don't have anything on an animal-based diet yet. And frankly, it does look like the establishment is afraid to touch the negative outcomes of the standard American diet. But again, the media is reminding us just how great the standard American diet is. It's like by rote. They feel like they have to because probably the government has been pushing the standard American diet in one form or another since the late 1960s. That's why they do it. They don't even think about it. They just go boom, boom, boom. Here it is. Here's why you do it. It's all conventional wisdom at this point, and sometimes conventional wisdom isn't very wise at all. And now the vegans are coming out in force too, because they're pretty upset about this. Vegan Buzz News reported this story with the headline, "New study claims vegans and vegetarians depressed twice as often as meat eaters." They cited a bunch of studies by universities claiming the opposite is actually true. Here's the thing about university studies that is something that we need to consider, even in ones that support our own position. And I should do a separate video on this, but the university departments of all kinds get funded by the studies they do. And organizations can pay university departments through a research grant to study questions for them. And I mean, the application for research grants is part of your job as a college professor. I've worked on these before for professors, again, when I was in grad school, but not in the nutrition realm and in other areas of public policy. And it's a pretty open secret that who's funding your research will skew your research results pretty heavily. You see it in environmental research, pretty badly in environmental research, actually, and you will see it almost certainly in the agriculture research, the realm of agriculture. It's just inescapable. So a lot of agriculture departments at various universities get funded through these research programs because the university ends up keeping a pretty large cut of the grant money. So you get a big agriculture research or university. There are universities, two of them near me, the two big ones here in Oklahoma, are pretty well known for their agriculture research programs. They're getting their money from big agriculture and big food, the industrial food companies, which is probably why you're not going to see research studies that say processed food, even process-based plant food, bad. You're just not going to see that. But also, there's also anecdotal evidence. How many of you have ever known vegans? I have. So I grew up just west of Portland, Oregon, and I spent about a decade living in the city and traveling and more than that, 2 decades traveling to the city pretty much every day because of, going from being a community college student to working or to finishing a PhD. I had to commute to a city, and that city was Portland, Oregon. So I've known vegans. I've known a lot of them, and they all had issues like that worse, or most of them did, except for the ones who were what we would call, or what ended up getting called in those circles, the junk food vegans. the people who were essentially eating processed vegan sugary foods. They were self-correcting, we'll say, those issues with sugar, the drug that gets its hooks in you the worst on anything that we know of, other than some of the very hard federally controlled substances. So we know veganism, plant-based diets are not good for you. More studies, of course, as part of the basic scientific process, need to be done on this. But it's nice to see that we're finally getting vindicated on this after this community existing for only a few years, really. And I think this community's existence helped a lot in this way. And the early work by some of the medical professionals who are researchers on this and who are experts in this and advocates for this way of eating have helped push this, because the carnivore diet's growing, folks. We know this. Go look at the biggest YouTube channels for carnivore influencers and see how many subscribers and views they get. This community is growing. The number of people wanting to try this are growing. And that's good news. Let me know what you thought of these studies in the comments, please. I will try to put them in the pinned links to them in the pinned comments so you can read them for yourself. So check the pinned comment. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It really does help. I'm Anthony Stine, the Practical Carnivore, and thanks for your time today.